And it is Straight Talk with three of my favorite people. All three are amazing love coaches, relationship coaches. All three have amazing shows they do every week online, which we'll talk a little bit about. And so let's say hello to Trish Wright.
Hi, everyone. Welcome Friday night. And you are on Straight Talk, and we are going to get hot and heavy on grief and mindfulness tonight.
Yeah. With two really beautiful friends and compadres. We've got Heidi Love.
Hi, I'm Heidi Love, coming to you from Hawaii. Some aloha. And I'm honored to be here with you guys tonight. This is one of my favorite topics, actually. If grief can be a favorite topic, it's one of mine.
And that's what, yeah. And when you first suggested it, I really appreciated that. And we've got Timothy Earle, also from Maui. Heidi's on the Big Island. Welcome, Timothy.
Thank you. Just drove through a rainbow to get home to be on the call. So I'm very much enjoying the rainbows. Beautiful. I'm really delighted to get to talk about grief and mindfulness, two of my favorite topics and practices.
Well, let's go right into it. Just want to remind people that you are all welcome to come into our Zoom webinar room. And I'll post while they're chatting, I will post the link. But any of you who are listening want to write it down. The link is, you go into Zoom and it's 980-068-42539. I'll read that one more time. 980-684-2539. I'm going to ask and put the spotlight on each of you. We'll start with Heidi and then Timothy and then Trish. Just opening thoughts about grief and mindfulness.
I think that they really go hand in hand. The one thing I guess I want to say about grief right out the bat is a lot of people think of death and grief, and I want to explore all the other ways we grieve, because I find with a lot of my clients that many of them aren't aware of the impact of grief because it wasn't a death, but maybe a death of a relationship or a death of a dream or a lost cause, and those things cause grieving as well. So that's the first thing that I was thinking of. And mindfulness to me is absolute presence, and to have your heart break open rather than to break down. I think it takes a lot of mindfulness and presence through the grieving process.
Can you give an example of someone maybe that you've coached who's grieving about, and maybe not something as big as a death, but as an example of something worth grieving that's not so epic as death, but nevertheless that requires mindfulness and dropping
in? I'm thinking right now of a friend that is actually kind of gripped with grief. She's had many losses at the same time, none of them a death. But her roommate of 26 years is in the hospital, not dead, but he's out of the home. So she's wandering around in the home, feeling lost, feeling, not feeling that company, which are some of the similar things. And then also grieving the loss of her friend leaving the area, her best friend, and at the same time lost some work. So the impact on her right now, and she didn't know it was about grief, is feeling depressed, can't have word recall, feeling kind of crazy and out of her mind, forgetting things, driving down the freeway and getting off the wrong exit. I mean, these are all signs, can be signs of the grieving process, and we sometimes don't even know it. We're like, what is going on with me? I can't even think straight. You're in a brain fog sometimes, especially in the shock and denial phase.
That's a really good example. One of the things that that comes to my mind is I've been working with families where teenagers are feeling so much grief because they can't go to proms, they can't go to dances. And such a significant part of a teenager's life is their social connection. I think all of us are missing certain social connections, but boy, it's especially hard for teenagers, and so there's another example of grieving. I'm going to put the spotlight on Timothy And just to ask you, Timothy, what are kind of your opening thoughts about grief and mindfulness?
I think most of us are born into this world, to my knowledge, and most of us leave it through this other birth that we call death. And between birth and death, I can't think of one human being that I've known that hasn't been touched by grief of losing someone to passing, grief like Heidi's talking about, where there's a lot of change or a lot of turbulence, or we lose an animal, or we lose a relationship, or we lose stock investments. And these can also be things we grieve. The example I would give about grieving, I'm working with a client right now who's what I would call in a death process, meaning her identity has basically died off. Her work, her communities no longer want her. And there's a complex story here. But as she just practices and learns to sit with the discomfort of the grieving process and identify that she's in it and stay in it, I really do see her coming to the other side as a new butterfly, if you will, a new person that is alive and well. And so I'm interested in grief and the grieving process, or the dying process of our identities, and the fact that we can change. And that touches me personally in some ways. And then mindfulness, for me, to know God and know perfection or love on a deep level, I don't know that I could have found that without a mindfulness practice called meditation. So mindfulness to me is something we do moment to moment. As Heidi said, we stay present, but it's also a meditative process at times where we go inward and surrender to an entire universe that is not external, but internal. And most people spend their waking days focusing on the outside rather than examining this invisible world that's on the inside, which is so precious to me.
I really want us to talk about that tonight. So, we're going to come back to that for sure, because I think a lot of people, at least I've heard from some clients, when I talk about mindfulness, they picture that it's got to be a very complex spiritual practice by people that are dedicated to doing yoga and meditation several hours a day. And so when we come back to you, or, anything you want to add about simple practices of mindfulness that, don't take up a lot of time and energy, but that are valuable. So, but we gotta get Trish on for a moment. Hey, Trish.
Hi.
What are your opening thoughts about grief and mindfulness?
I just want to, say thank you, Heidi, for bringing in that there's many places that we grieve, and the world right now is still grieving the change in social activity and the way that we communicate and the way that we interact with each other. There's also the grieving around, the fantasy that one's created, within relationships or in friendships or in work or deadlines or whatever. Like there's places where there's attachments of some kind, and that when that perceived loss happens is when we grieve that. So we can also grieve parts of ourself, or things that we thought was true about us, or things that we wanted to be true about us. And for me, mindfulness lives in the awareness of the moment, right? The being in the awareness of the moment and being with. So it's not necessarily, like, for me, it's sitting with like, okay, what is now? What am I sensing? What are the sensations? It's very physical. It's what's happening in my brain. Like, oh, I'm running a crap ton of thoughts right now. I'm in the grieving process and I'm secularly running these thoughts. Like, what actually is like going on in my body? What's in the room? What's happening now is part of my awareness practice. And that's, I've had multiple PTSD triggers and have been in triggered states for long periods of time where I've been in kind of grieving states of my own safety. And my therapist was always reminding me to stop, take a deep breath, list 5 things that you can see and feel in the room. It's 5 sensations. What is your breath doing? Are you fully expanding your lungs? Where's your tongue? Is it on the roof of your mouth? Relax your jaw. Like, there were places that in the tightness of grief, in the tightness of the loss, that there were places to just be mindful of what is actually happening in the moment. So that's where I'm at.
Beautiful. I love each and every one of you. You guys are all so cool. I just got the inspiration to share a story about the healing power of grief. Timothy, Heidi, and Trish all know I love to tell stories. It is part of, as Uncle Scott likes to tell his stories. And this is actually a true story about the power of grieving. This was about 10 or 12 years ago, and I was teaching in Louisville, Kentucky. And I was there for like several days teaching workshops and such. And one of my ongoing clients and people who were coming to our workshops said, Scott, I really have a big family crisis and I need your help. Can I hire you for an afternoon? I said, fine. So we scheduled the afternoon, but I didn't know anything about it. And so she picks me up because I didn't have a car there. I didn't have a car. She picks me up and we're driving actually over the river from Kentucky into Indiana. And she's setting me up for what is about to happen. Well, it turns out that 10 years earlier, she was in a car with her 2 twin brothers, her mother and her father, and they were in a horrific car accident. One of the twin brothers was killed instantly. The other 4 members of the family were all injured, had various physical injuries, and especially had emotional injuries. The father and the surviving brother bonded, and they became drug addicts and ended up in a whole drug crime reality together, and then ended up in jail. The mother divorced the father and became a born-again Christian and married another born-again Christian. And the sister, the daughter and the sister who had hired me, was the only one in contact with everybody. Everybody else had separated from each other. Either the father and the surviving brother had separated. And she had arranged for them to all be in the same house for the first time in years. And I'm supposed to somehow create a healing experience for them. And I swear to you, as she's telling me this story, and this is like way beyond my pay grade. This is way beyond my capacity. I mean, this is back when I was teaching NVC with puppets, like, giraffe and jackal puppets, right? This was like way beyond the fucking puppets. And I really didn't know what to do. I really didn't. And so we get there and we got there first, then people start arriving and it's super awkward. People are like in different parts of the living room and nobody really quite knows what to do. And honestly, I thought, I did know that there was, they had a Christian tradition. So I started with a prayer. And as I was praying and I kind of turned life over to spirit, what came through me was for us all to mourn the death of Travis. Travis was the one who died. And it's funny, I don't even remember the name of the woman who hired me, to be honest, but I remember the name of the boy who died was Travis. And I just called for us, what we have in common here is we all miss Travis so much. Let's mourn right now. And I hadn't even planned this. This was one of those like God things, spirit coming through me. The sister starts to cry, the mother starts to cry, and literally everybody slowly comes into the center of the room. And the next thing I know, they're holding each other and weeping together. And the moral of the story is that they had never grieved. They had never mourned. They all had their different strategy to avoid the horrific pain, whether it was drugs or born-again Christian, but they had never mourned together. This was the first time in 10 years that they'd been together and that they mourned together. And really, my job was pretty much done after that. I mean, we did a little bit of talk and conversation, but that was really the healing moment, was them mourning together. So I didn't know I was going to tell that story until about 5 minutes ago, but I'm going to go to gallery view now and take the spotlight on me and just open it up to anything that anybody wants to share as the next place to go.
I was really touched by that, Scott, the grieving together, because I've had parents who have, of course, asked me, how do I help my child grieve the loss of their friend? And there's so many young children, suicide, dying of overdoses. And my daughter, who is 20, Macy, she's lost 4 friends in the last 3 years due to different things. And I have had to support her through it. And you just triggered that really tender spot in me, because we all feel so powerless as parents. Like, we want to rescue, we want to help them through it, you know? And Scott just gave the best advice you can give. And that's what I shared with my daughter. I just listened to her. And this is what I tell my clients who are also going through this: listen to them, empathetic listening, be there for them, talk to them about it. I told her, call all your friends and remember stories. I knew all the kids too that passed away, so I told stories. I remember when we brought Trayvon to Hawaii, and we did this and we did that, and we did boxing classes. And that's why, you know, you see groups in grieving, like funerals or whatever. I could go on a soapbox because I don't really agree that we do it great anymore. But that piece of coming together and telling stories and crying together and being sad and letting it be okay. I mean, especially teenagers, they need to know that it's okay to feel horrible, because it feels horrible and it's okay.
I'm so touched by that too. I think that it's so important to remind people that there's different feelings that come up with grief as well. Like, it's not just the sadness and the tears. I mean, what are the stages of grief? Like denial, anger,
Depression,
acceptance.
acceptance.
There's another one.
Bargaining. That's my favorite.
Oh no, yeah. And I think that, like, it's really important to just allow people to be, like, just be with them in whatever is their experience. And again, like, the way that we grieve is so vast. A few years ago, I don't even know. This whole COVID time is really messing with my time frame. I went to a really amazing week-long workshop, and they gave us the opportunity to have these emotional release tools where we were like screaming and pounding and like moving our bodies. I know you both know where I was going. You all know where I was at. And it was the most amazing allowance for my grieving process, because I realized that, you know, I hadn't grieved for a lot of things that I was still holding on to. And I got to cry and scream and fit about it in a container that was so supportive. I love these conversations about children as well. It brought up a memory of a young girl that I was best friends with, who was murdered by her brother when I was in 3rd grade. Like, oh, there's obviously some still stuff there. I'm calling you both tomorrow, and we just told me why I cry.
You know, I want to go to Timothy in a second, but what she just said is really an important thing to do, is that grief, in certain situations, we never stop grieving. It's not like you just, it's all over, right? And, you know, I mean, my wife died 9 years ago, and I still have periodic moments where I'm deeply mourning her, you know, and it comes at interesting times. I remember a couple of years after she died, I went into the linen closet, and she had put little Post-it notes all over our house. And there was a little Post-it note that I'd seen a gazillion times in her handwriting, but for whatever reason, that particular moment, that particular day, the moment I saw that Post-it note from her, you know, that this is the This is the, where you put the sheets, and this is where you put the pillows, this is the flats, and this is the, and I just burst into tears, So it's like we have to allow our bodies and our emotions. Don't stuff, please, please. If there's anything we get out of tonight's show, no stuffing. May it always be safe for whatever wants to come through, whatever grieving, whatever uncomfortable emotions. Remember, there's no bad emotions. There's no negative feelings. There's just uncomfortable ones. Timothy, we haven't heard from you for a moment, so I'm going to put the spotlight on you. I think you're muted.
Unmute myself and get rid of this box. Thank you. Yeah, if we come to mindfulness for just a moment, a lot of people think mindfulness means brain or thinking or no thought or, having an empty brain. And for me, mindfulness means being, as Trish was talking about, with what's actually happening in the present moment, including our emotions. And if we don't judge them as good or bad, we allow those emotions to flow through us. We don't stuff them, as Scott said, like a creek running through a mountain. We want it to flow into the little pond and then out the other side, or the pond grows stagnant and is no longer drinkable fresh water. And I think a lot of us, especially men, raise my hand, we're taught not to feel and to stuff at our emotions. And when we move into a grief experience, it's like we have an entire pizza of emotions coming at us, and we're trying to eat that whole thing at once, and we're choking. And so grief moves us around on the pizza, if you will. There's no particular order. We're angry one moment, trying to bargain one moment, in disbelief another, despair another. And we're moving around in these different aspects of grief. But when we stuff it and we don't allow ourselves to move and to feel, one of the common things I see with clients is that they become suicidal and they no longer want to live. Doesn't mean they're going to act on it. And as they begin to actually feel the different stages of grief, usually the suicide ideation just magically disappears, because they weren't actually wanting to end life. They were just avoiding feeling the intensity and the overwhelm of all of these different emotions that were coming at the same time. So, thank you.
Thank you. Just go to gallery view, and whoever wants to go next with a sharing or a practice. Heidi or Trish?
Yeah.
Heidi,
Yeah, I was just I'm literally just taking it all in, letting it kind of, drop into my body. Something that I'd love to talk about a little bit is really grieving relationships, and really grieving like the ideas that we have in relationships of how it could or want it to be. Like there's places even coming up. Gosh, I mean, I was just sharing right before the show is like there's grief still around the way that I was raised, and some of the capacity at which my parents could really share their love with me. And there's grief from old relationships that dissolved because of abuse. Like there's grief there, and the only way for me to get through those places is to be with the feelings, to stop and drop and like, okay, what is happening and what are the needs that aren't met? Like, what are the things that weren't met in the moment? So like grieving the unmet need, right? And really just being with it and being like, wow, I had this beautiful need for safety and security here. And this is what it looked like. This is what the fantasy in which I wanted it to look like. And to notice just how sweet and innocent, a lot of people's wants and needs are, right? So that, of course, I mean, there's a lot of crying. There's some screaming, there's some fit pounding, like, there's all of the things. Sometimes there's some give up, and it's just being with the human expression of what is. Like, stoicism as much as we all, idolize that piece, I don't actually think it works or helps. That really, if I'm really just in a mood, there's a couple places, like if you're really grieving and you know that you're under sourced, and you like, make sure you call the person who can hold you without fixing it. And if you need the space, take the space. Again, that can be a slippery slope, right? Like the space can be like, okay, I'm overwhelmed, I'm overstimulated, I don't know what else to do, I'm just going to shut down. And that, if you need the space, do that. And remember to reach back out if you start doing the rat wheel thing, right? So those are just some tips.
Beautiful.
I also like to remind myself that grief has no time frame, as Scott was talking about earlier, that I lost a dog that jumped out of a Christmas box when I was 5, and I got to keep him for maybe a year. And watching him die was very traumatic. And my father wasn't really very sensitive back then and wasn't very equipped. It was all very fast. And I still grieve this little animal. And I remember people telling me, why are you so attached to a dog? And that wasn't very helpful. I kind of took that on and thought, yeah, I shouldn't be crying with this much over a dog. And relationships with things, with plants, with trees, with dogs, they are just as precious as relationships between humans. And it's not all of us put the same hierarchical strategy on it. And then someone said, well, you've cried enough. You should be over that now. And that wasn't very helpful either, because I'm clearly still grieving this little animal named Otto. And my grief it's a pleasure. Now that I can feel my grief, and I know I'm in a grief process, and I can move through the different stages, and I'm not judging anger as bad and trying to stifle it down, and I'm not judging sadness as bad and trying to not cry, it allows me to move through those stages. And so grief has become my friend, because I know that once I move through it, I'm going to be lighter, feel clean and clear, and be able to come back to the presence and all the gratitude I have for the beautiful things that are in my life right now. But to tell someone, you should only grieve the loss of that ex-partner for 2 years, that's long enough, then you should be over it and get a new partner. Some people grieve a relationship their whole life, and that's okay. That's their grief process. And I'm not making an argument that we ought to stuff our feelings and be stuck in the grief process. But if it takes us 10 years to grieve the loss of a loved one, even just the end of a relationship, and other people, it only takes them 2 weeks, no judgment on either end. We're all very different in the way we grieve. Well, not the way, but how much time it takes. I think the way we do it is similar in some ways.
Timothy, it inspired me to share. Is that okay, Scott? I heard you were going to pipe in too. I think it's so important. A couple of things. Well, everything you said I loved. I always love what you say. But there's a couple things that really stood out to me. And one was, I think you said grief is pleasure to you, or grief is, did you use the word pleasure? Yeah. I love that you brought that up, and I want to talk about that. And then the other thing is I wanted to talk about compartmentalization and what it took me to be able to grieve while raising 2 kids, while doing this and that. So if I forget one of those things, will you guys remind me? I had a brother who committed suicide, and it hit me like nothing else ever did. I had survivor guilt. I racked my brain with why him and not me. Were both addicts. I recovered. He died from it. Anyway, so this was a big part of an experience for grief with me. I've had many others, but this one was pertinent. And at first, I constricted. It totally shut me down. I was numb. And I know that's one of the stages of grief, is being numb, but I chose, like, I don't believe in this world anymore. I'm hurt, I'm broken, I'm shut down. So that's why earlier I said you can shut down or you can break open. And at first my heart was broken and I shut down. And I realized I was hurting me. I wasn't present with my kids. I wasn't doing my life. I was like a robot. And I chose to break open. And by using mindfulness and allowing myself the grief. Part of my story as a mom was I can't afford to grieve. I don't have time. I have to be here for my kids. I have to do my work. I have to be here for my clients. And so I learned a healthy way to compartmentalize, to be present with you when I was working with you, and to put my grief on the shelf, to be present with my kids, sometimes grieving with them, sometimes being a mom and putting my grief on the shelf. I made sure that I took time to go up. I used to call it my attitude adjustment hill, and I'd go on a hike by myself, and I screamed at God. I had snot run down my face. I threw rocks as hard as I could at trees, and it was wonderful. And I allowed myself to be angry and cry and roll in the dirt and get messy. And then I'd go home and I compartmentalize and be a mom again. And I want to say that because I think it's an important skill, especially those of us that grieve for years. Grief comes and goes. When we say we grieve for 10 years or a whole life, it doesn't mean that every moment of our life is consumed by grief. It comes in waves, and allowing it to come in like the tide and go out like the tide of the ocean. And that we don't have to push it away, but we can still live our lives too. And I also want to say, I used to think that I couldn't be happy because my brother killed himself and I wasn't allowed to laugh anymore. And those of you that watch Timothy and I's show know that I love to laugh and I'm kind of a jackass. And and I learned that even though I'm sad, even though I've lost things, even though my mom died, even though my brother died, I can still laugh. I laughed at their life celebrations. I laughed at the memorial. I laugh in memory of them, and I cry and I hurt, and my heart is broken open. And that's where the light gets in.
So good.
I'm
I loved.
Go ahead, Trish.
It's not going to be long, but what I loved is that you created a container for it. Is like the compartmentalizing was like, okay, I have these feelings. Instead of stuffing them, you created a place or a container in which you could express those things. So it wasn't consuming your whole life and taking you out. Right? I think that's a really key piece for a lot of transformation and emotional work.
Thank
Couple.
If I oh, go ahead, Scott.
I just want to thank everybody. There's some comments coming in, and just a reminder, we love hearing from our audience. So whether you're in the Zoom room with us or whether you are watching live on Facebook, I'm kind of scanning through and taking a look for comments. So any thoughts, comments, questions, or even if you want support, if you're having trouble with grieving or wanting to know more about mindfulness, let us know and we'll do our best to respond to you. So one other thing I wanted to say also, and that is, I love the word bittersweet when I'm grieving. And again, I'm going to, talk about the loss of my wife. Of course, it's bitter that she's gone, but it's sweet that I still miss her so much 9 years later. Because the sweetness is that the love is still so deep. And as the years go by, I become more and more grateful for the years that we did have together, the time that we did have together. And all of that is sweet. And so grieving doesn't have to be just all black and dark. It can be bittersweet. And I just invite people to play with that, the sweetness of what we miss, the sweetness of the love that we shared or the experiences that we had that are no longer happening. Even, the story about Timothy and the puppy, right? Well, how sweet that all these years later, your love for that dog brings tears to you enough to bring tears to me right now, right? Like that little puppy may have only had 1 year of life, but he still lives on through your love. That's sweet. That is really sweet. And then one last other thing I wanted to say, and this is in reference to, the get over it thing. I think it's Brene Brown who has a quote, which is, the cruelest phrase in American culture is get over it. That's a cruel thing to say to another human being. And I just want us to remember that. Like, let's never say that to another person again. Let's never do that. Okay, who's next?
I was just going to give a way of helping people who are in grief, because we're all in relationship with others and we tend to know, oh, my best friend lost his brother. A tip or a thing that I would suggest is call those people and ask them to tell you about the person or the dog or the child or whatever it is, the relationship that ended. Ask them to tell you about it and just listen. So just to model it, I might say to Heidi, can you tell me about a time that was really wonderful with your brother?
Are you asking me live?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yes, I remember when I think I was about 14, so he was 11. And we lived in Grand Lake, Colorado, and we could go skiing on Mondays because we only had 4 days of school. So we went to go ride the bus and go downhill skiing. And he liked to prank me. So he took me up the slope, and I love to just follow. I'm still that way. When I travel, I like someone else to tell me where I'm going and whatever. I just enjoy the ride with the person. So I get on the ski thing with him, and he takes me up to a black diamond hill, and we go down moguls together. And he just thought it was so funny, and I thought I was going to die the whole way down. But he stayed with me the whole time too, and we got down the hill. But I just remember his joy in that, and then also pushing me to my limits, and then the laughter at the bottom of the hill. And he was always, bonsai king. He would pretty much do anything.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful.
Thank you.
I want to read a couple comments from our people watching. And again, welcome to everybody watching, Kit and Cece and Sunshine and Roger. Cece writes, I love looking at grief as my friend. Thank you. I still get teary when I'm reminded of my father, even though he died over 30 years ago. Yeah, the love goes on forever. Mindfulness. How about each person sharing a mindfulness practice? Timothy, you want to go first?
Yeah. If we bring it into Scott's set, I think it's important into meditation off the mat. So that can be taking a hot bath and scrubbing yourself with one of those brushes, get all the dead skin off, and really focusing on the sensation of it and staying present to the sensation of it. And there's no thoughts happening. You're just with the sensation of it, the water and the brush. Another one of my favorite ones that I do with couples is a alignment process where I teach them to lay belly to belly, where their belly's skin is touching, and they're wrapped up in each other, but they can still see in each other's eyes, and they breathe in together and then they sigh out, and they do that, just that. There's other levels to it, but that's the basic first level. And it sounds so simple, but if your belly is touching another human's and you're looking in their eyes and you're breathing in and sighing out, after you get over the giggles, your brain clears and your parasympathetic state is what you drop into. Sensuality, presence becomes accessible, because as humans, we're like dogs, animals. We don't want to get too close to someone. Even hugs, you notice most people, it's like boom, boom, and out, right? Because they're there is a part of them, their amygdala, that's saying, I could get killed, something bad could happen, right? And so when you have a lover or a child or a good friend, this belly to belly practice that David Cates taught me, which I call aligning with each other, is just a magical tool to clear the mind and come into presence and stay there. And if you do it 10 minutes, it's as good as any psychedelic.
Love it, Timothy. I have some. I was thinking during this time of COVID, I have several clients that live alone. They're not in a relationship and don't have anybody else living in the home, not even a roommate. And many of them are staying pretty isolated and missing touch. So this is a mindfulness practice for anybody, but I want to specify that it can be really wonderful for those of you that are missing hugs and touch and need to do something at home by yourself that can create that in a very mindful way. So take a bunch of washcloths and roll them up, and you can either put them in a microwave, you soak them in water and you can put them in the microwave, or I like to take a hot pan and put essential oils and I get them very hot in there, and then use your tongs so you don't burn yourself. Put them on a plate and they're nice and wet and they smell however you want them to smell because you've added oils or just the water. And then you mindfully have some music, put a candle, and have a date with yourself. You are naked and you touch with that warm texture and smell your whole body with the washcloths. And it feels so wonderful. And it's such a great self-love practice. And it really gives you those endorphins of touch that you're not getting from other people. And you can give them to yourself. So that's one practice. And then the other one that I want to share, because I'm also a survivor of trauma, and trauma is something I specialize in with helping people. Sometimes during the grief, it activates trauma. So the thinking is just not great. And I love what Trish said earlier of just thinking of the thing you're doing. I mean, I asked my brother one time, because he had way more, not the brother I lost, but another brother that went through much more than I've been through. And I said, what do you do? Like, how do you even get through the day? And he said, sis, sometimes the next right thing is just to do the dishes. And so when I do the dishes, I feel the water on my hand. I watch my hand go around the plate. I make myself be present however I can, because I have that itty bitty shitty committee and my brain can just go off and I'm nowhere where I'm at. So where my feet are at, where are my hands at? Oh, I'm brushing my teeth. I can taste the toothpaste. I mean, that can be mindfulness, just arriving again over and over where you are. If you're one of those people that spins out, it's a practice that I've had to use and still use every day of my life because my brain is that way. So I arrive again and I arrive again.
I love that one. I've used it so many times. I mean, like so many times.
Repeat. Go off and repeat.
Again, I mean, it's 5. Can you just notice 5 things that's happening?
Yeah, I love that.
And then it's in a lot of different therapy styles as well. And the one that I've practiced recently, like a fun practice with other people too, is the Gestalt awareness practice of I'm noticing. So you sit with another person. If you have availability, you sit with another person on the other side of a screen, or if you have a COVID pod, to just sit, give yourself a timer, tell out loud what you're noticing. What is it? A thought? Is it? And try to stay out of story. So if you understand what story means, is that you're creating a dialogue about something. So I'm noticing that there's fear in my body, or I'm noticing there's a squeak in the chair. I'm noticing my fingertips are cold, and really just dropping into the body while you take nice deep breaths. Or, oh, I noticed that I stopped breathing, or my awareness is now on you. And that's one of the most helpful ones that I've used. So it's very similar to Heidi's as well. And I also love kind of asking myself questions when I've noticed that I'm running a secular thought pattern. And I'm like, okay, all right, Trish, what are you doing? Is this helping? And like just the awareness and the mindfulness of becoming aware that something's going on that I'm not in control of, I think is also really helpful, especially when you're grieving, especially when things are really up and you're emotional. It's very compassionate. And then my last one is Scott's tool, which is the self-empathy tool of becoming aware of one's feelings and what their wants and needs are. I think that's a really powerful awareness practice, you know, the thoughts to the feelings to the wants and needs.
I think that I notice I'm just picturing a group of people grieving or mourning together and doing that mindful practice as a way to transition and allow things to move and be aware that other people may or may not be experiencing the same thing. And what an intimacy building exercise. I think that would be really neat.
Have you ever heard of open floor, Heidi?
Mm-mm.
So it merges 5 rhythms dance and Gestalt awareness.
Oh, wow. I would love that.
There's a lot of, it's not as much verbal communication, but it's expressing through movements in your body and dance.
Nice.
Really powerful.
I'm going to do a little bit of administrative stuff here. Just want to welcome in a moment. We're going to hear from Krishna, who has joined us all the way from Australia. And we've got something special. At the end of tonight's show, we're going to watch a beautiful video that Heidi created on grief. So everybody stick around because I'm looking forward to watching that. So that's going to be how we'll conclude tonight's thing. Also, just want to let everybody know that Heidi and Timothy are master relationship coaches in Love Coach Academy, and they are teaching a course tomorrow morning. And it's the first of a new series of classes that Love Coach Academy is offering. And it's going to be at 10 o'clock in the morning, California time, Pacific time. And it's all on understanding jealousy. So, you know, you're getting a chance to see the incredible wisdom of Heidi and Timothy tonight. And they're very wise on many topics. They have a great show they do every week on recovery and dealing with addiction, codependence. And tomorrow they're doing an entire class on understanding jealousy. So really want to encourage people to register for that class. And for more information, if you go to my Facebook page, I'm the only Scott Thomas on the planet. If you go to my Facebook page, you'll see the link right there where you can register. So, and before we go to Krishna, Heidi, Timothy, anything you want to share about your class tomorrow?
Oh, you're muted.
We have a really beautiful class structured tomorrow. I believe that jealousy is one of the most misunderstood states. I'm not calling it an emotion because it's a multitude of beliefs and emotions all under one umbrella. And I think most of us have felt it and try to stay away from it and create systems and processes in order to not feel jealous. And yet I think jealousy has a lot to teach us. So I'm excited tomorrow with Heidi to first explore what is jealousy, and then secondly, look at how it might actually aid us in becoming more liberated, more expanded, integrated adults.
Yeah, and we're gonna uncover different scenarios of jealousy too, because I know in my life, like there's been some relationships I haven't been jealous in and some I've been insanely jealous in. And why does that happen to us? So join us tomorrow. We'd love to have you. Timothy and I love teaching together, and yep, just always a divine flow. So we invite you into the flow.
What time is it?
10 o'clock Pacific time, 1 p.m. Eastern time, and very early in the morning in Australia for Krishna. And with that, I'm going to put the spotlight on our dear friend Krishna. And Krishna, you know, that bright background behind you makes it hard to see your face. So although it's a gorgeous, beautiful, we're jealous background, we want to see you. So yeah, thank you. Much nicer. Welcome, dear beloved Krishna. What?
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. What?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you, and thank you for coming all the way from the Gold Coast of Australia. And what comes up for you on the topic of grief?
So I would love some help with some grief I've been processing, and I've been processing this for some months now. And every time I feel I've broken through it, there's another layer which sits under it. It's as though, but wait, there's more. It's the gift that keeps giving. And I look at this from a place of grief actually equals love at some level. And so the piece that's come up probably about 3 months ago, and Scott's helped with this journey. My ex-partner signed over sole care of the children to me. So I now have our children pretty much 13 days a fortnight. And it's actually been grief. It's been grief because I thought we were doing this together. I thought I had a relationship with the mother, at least as co-parents. It's grief because there's a part of my life that I've lost my freedom. If I have the children week on, week off, or at least 3 days a week that I'm off, I've got freedom to actually step into a different identity and be a single guy and go out and have a social life. It's like now I've got 2 young children full time. I've looked at, it's grieving my relationship with the mother. I've looked at actually empathizing with her and accepting her with her values just they are and not asking her to be someone else. And yeah, that's helped a lot. And I've dropped into a space of love with it. I've kept going through layer after layer of radical acceptance and okay, this is how it is. But it's still there. There's still pain. There's still hurt. Help, please.
Open it up to any of our love coaches who want to provide some wisdom.
I think, if I may, that it's being in that grief process and there's no real way out when I listen to you, right? There's no actual solution or thing to do or way to fix it. It's your life, your children, the mother of your kids, and the situation that you're in. And so the first thing that comes up for me is just this sadness and this being with you in the sad part of it, you know, that yeah, you don't have time to have a life of your own. You are a full-time father, among other things that I know about you. So I'm just sitting with that sadness.
Thank you. I'm a father, I'm a businessman, I am. There are a lot of identities and a lot of roles. And the bit that feels that he misses out is me honoring my feelings and me honoring my emotions and me having whatever freedom that I thought I had.
So what I'm hearing is it's the loss of freedom. You're grieving the loss of freedom. Would that be accurate?
You know what? Now that you mention it, Scott, there's another piece to it. Part of me is denying losing the relationship with the mother. It's like, no, we'll just reconfigure it. We still love each other and we have children together and we'll just have a different relationship and it's called parenting. And it's actually really accepting that the relationship is over. There's nothing left in common.
So Krishna, what you were just describing now is kind of in and out of the 5 stages of grief, like the bargaining, you know, before we come to full acceptance. And sometimes we get to acceptance, we're like, okay, this is the way it is. And then we go back to bargaining or back to being angry. And I just want to offer empathy too, that it's there's so many pieces when it's with our children, and we want that support. And I think, you know, you and I have talked and we've been on calls together about codependency and stuff with Timothy. And I'm just thinking about the piece of how you've stepped into your power and taking care of yourself and having boundaries, and then to be powerless. Like she walks away, and where are the boundaries? Like, where's the help? Where am I, you know, and how frustrating and powerless that must feel. And I can share with that personally. I love the ghetto term baby daddy. My baby daddy wasn't in my kids' life, and I had them full time too. And the longing of having that help. And I used to get jealous. I loved having my kids full time. You know, you guys hear, you know, that I love my kids, but I used to get pissed when I would have a friend and they're like, oh yeah, my kids are gone all weekend and I'm going away with my boyfriend. And I was like, F you know, thinking. So I don't know if you're looking for empathy or solution, but that is some empathy for you. And I'm certainly happy to talk to you about it anytime.
Thank you, Heidi.
You know,
I
Heidi,
think another piece.
I just want to real quickly, it's so wonderful what she just asked. I don't know if you want empathy or a solution. And that's such a great question to ask people, you know, because sometimes people just want to be heard and felt and they want empathy. And I've had people say, I don't want empathy, Scott. I want solutions.
Yeah, me.
So, you know, it's just great to check in and find out what a person wants. Or sometimes somebody they want empathy first and then get to solution. Yeah. Krishna,
I want solutions because what I've learned is it's not just one layer, it's not just one piece, it's not just one piece of grief. There are so many different layers that are playing out, and I can only get through them as they come into my awareness and I get present with them. But another one that just come up in this conversation for me is it's grieving my own childhood. Yeah. I had my own illusions that my parents weren't present, or I felt they weren't present the way I wanted them to. So I don't want my children to go through the same thing. So then I'm imposing my model of the world on my children and then martyring myself and not asserting boundaries with their mother saying, hey, you need to show up. And I don't even know if those kind of boundaries are effective.
Are you worried that your children are going to be impacted from the loss of your mother? Is that their mother? Is that what you're talking about? Yes. Oh, that was one of my biggest griefs and anger part, was being so angry of them hurting the children, you know. And so you said you wanted some solution. I have some, and it's part of checking in is there an action I can take? Is there a request I can make? Is there something I can do? And if there is, absolutely take the action. Say the request, do the action. If there's anything with court, anything with anything. And then we have to let the results to the divine, because we can't control the other person. We can't make them do what we want, but we can take whatever action is available. So that's always what I ask myself. Is there an action available? If there is, take it. If there's not, then it's self-soothing, reaching out for help, getting support on the frustration of the action not turning out the way that you wanted it to or expected it to. And sometimes it does, you know, but so it's that gentle dance between action and knowing we can't control the outcome. So having support around that.
Thank you, Heidi. And you know, now that we're talking through this piece, what I'm realizing is this is a place where I feel like I'm in freeze and I don't have boundaries. There are so many reasons why I just step in and say, I'll take responsibility for this. I'll deal with this. I'll look after this. It's okay. I got it covered. Yeah. And that's my outward persona, but inwardly, it's like, oh, wow, this is hard.
This is difficult. You're touching on the thing that's coming to me after the beautiful advice that Heidi's giving you, and that is, it's very important for a single parent or both parents, family, the people who are the guardians or the person who's the guardian, to find the time and make it a priority to schedule it, to resource and have moments by yourself, to have some of that freedom, or you will not be the father that you really strive to be, because your anger and your resentment and other things will get in there, and your children will feel it, but they will internalize it improperly. They won't know why dad's snappy, or why he's withdrawn, or why he's exhausted. And so getting that 2 days every 10 days or every 2 weeks, getting that 2 days by yourself, doing whatever you want to do, however you can figure that out, asking for help or hiring the resources to do that. So important. And I feel for parents who can't. And there are parents who just can't make that happen.
You brought up something, Timothy, for me. I have many clients that have an au pair. I don't know if you would want to live in au pair, but it's been helpful for a lot of people. So throwing another solution out there to have support.
Thank you, Heidi. I have paid support. I've tried au pairs, and au pairs come with their own benefits and drawbacks. I choose to have paid help. They come in, they leave their problems in the car along with their cell phones. They come in, support, and leave, and they get paid by the hour. But yes, I very much, I have support, and I would not be able to do this without it. And Timothy, as you mentioned, yes, I do take time for self-care. The nights the children do go to their mother, which is at the moment is roughly 1 day a fortnight, I do go away on my own, and I just take a night away, and I just go away.
Like tonight.
Absolutely.
Like tonight.
Like tonight. That's where I am right now.
That's a blessing. I am going to, because I want us to watch this amazing video that Heidi has created. So Heidi, I'm going to pull it up. But before I do, so kind of just for everybody watching, because we're kind of at our hour point, I want to thank Timothy and Heidi and Krishna and Trish. And I want to just kind of go through how people can get a hold of you as love coaches. And then Heidi, I'll have you introduce the video and then I'll play it. Timothy, people are blown away. They're amazed. Who is this incredible man? How do they get a hold of you? And what are you offering?
You can find me at Earle-consulting.com, or just put TimothyEarle.com, 2 different websites. I work with families and family dynamics and young adults that are struggling with things, as well as sometimes teenagers. And then I also have a whole nother practice that is coaching couples and individuals. I love working with men on topics such as sexuality, integration, healing our child traumas. And I offer a free intake call. And I do that because I want to make sure that we are a good fit. And if we're not a good fit, then I want to refer you to someone who is. And there are a lot of people that I know, including people who are on this call. So please go to lovecoachacademy.com, timothyearle.com, earle-consulting.com. You can get my phone number there, my email address. And I really like the phone. So just pick it up and give me a call.
Great. Thank you. And Heidi, what are you offering and how do people reach you?
I unmuted, yeah. So you can reach me at HeidiLove.com. It's HEIDILOVE.com. And yes, that is my real last name. So I love working with individuals, couples, and families. And intimacy is what is really important to me. And that can be with yourself and others. I'm very well trained and life experience in the topics of grief and addiction recovery, relationships after recovery of addiction, and codependency and dysfunctional family systems. So also work a lot with people that have past trauma that is affecting their current relationships. So I also love to use the phone and text better than anything else, and you can find that on my website.
Beautiful, thank you. And Trish, what are you offering and how do people reach you?
Well, I have a lot of offerings that are kind of in the works, but mostly I'm working as a coach, empathy and dating coach currently. You can find me at embodiedhappiness.com, embodied-happiness. And you can also find me every Thursday morning on the Love Show on a multitude of pages, including Love Coach Academy and the Self Love Show. So find us there. We have really amazing guests all the time and really powerful tools to help you move through whatever you're working with and deeper self love.
Beautiful. And just a reminder on a couple of things. Again, tomorrow morning, Heidi and Timothy, I'm going to be watching. I can't wait to see this show, all about understanding jealousy. So that's tomorrow. And that is the first class in a new course that Love Coach Academy is offering, which we're really excited about. And it's a series of classes called Master Classes for Mastering All Relationships. And again, if you go to my profile page on Facebook, you'll see the link where you can click and you can learn all about this whole new series of classes. You can take them one at a time. Who's that guy talking? You can take them one at a time, or you can take the whole set. It's 10 classes, and it's featuring our favorite love coaches. Radiance is going to be teaching marriage to self. Trish is going to be teaching all about self-acceptance and repatterning the abandonment wound. Paul Sterling, compassionate communication. And so it goes. So definitely, please, please, please join us. It's going to be a really wonderful series, and we're very excited about it. All right, I've got this video here, and Heidi, in fact, you know what, let me put the spotlight on Heidi. There you go. I'm going to take it off Trish there for a moment. And we've got this video. Heidi, tell us about it.
So I had the opportunity to work in hospice for 9 years. And during that time, I was married to an addict that relapsed, and my brother committed suicide. So I was already in the topic of grief and loved grief and helping people through grief and through the dying process. And then I had my own grief happen. So I got very inspired to do the 5 stages of grief and talk about it. So this is an old video. I even had a married name, so it's not my same name, and very short hair. But I still think it's pertinent, and I always send it to people that are grieving. And I sometimes watch it myself as a reminder of how to move through the 5 stages of grief.
Beautiful. So we're going to watch it. It's about 26 minutes long. Certainly if our panelists need to leave, understandable, because we'd only committed to an hour. But if you want to stay and watch, and then we'll converse a little bit afterwards, definitely want to invite our audience, whether you're watching live or watching the video replay. And I recognize that the majority of people who watch this show watch the video replay. So thank you, whether you're watching live or the replay. And you know what, share this with your friends. It's a great way to meet people. And we're offering these things free of charge, and we'd love to meet new people. So do post it on your timeline if you find this valuable. All right, here we go with Heidi's video.
Two years ago, I was in my husband's office, once again on Crazy Train, digging for evidence of his relapse. And much to my demise and sadness, I found drugs in his briefcase and knew that what I had felt in my gut for the last year was true, that I could possibly be losing my husband. And the same day at 4 p.m. I got a call that my baby brother took his own life after relapsing on alcohol. And I want to share with you about grief and why it's important to know about it and how it impacts you and those around you, and how to eloquently move through it to the place of acceptance and peace. My name is Heidi Love, and I'm happy to share this journey with you, this journey of sweetness, this journey of there's no way out but through the grieving process. You may think, like most of us do, that the grieving process is just around the dying process, and it's not. We grieve all throughout our life. We grieve in childhood, we grieve when we're middle-aged, and we grieve when we're old, and many, many things impact us in a way that we need to grieve. And I want to share that those things can be very subtle and they can be very impactful, like I shared with you in the beginning. I mean, take for instance an 8-year-old child whose father loses their job, and the child doesn't understand, but they lose their home, they lose their friends because they move out of state, and they lose all that they had known. And maybe they don't know how to grieve or how to move through that because their parents are also grieving. I think one of the biggest losses that some of us don't acknowledge is the illusion of a marriage that we wanted that didn't turn out quite how we wanted it. And we need to grieve that dream that we had and move into acceptance of what we do have. And oftentimes we don't allow space to grieve our dreams that haven't come to fruition yet or that aren't possible with a certain person. We might grieve that we don't have the parents that we want or the family that we want. People even grieve addiction. You know, I've had to give up alcohol and I've given up food or sugar and flour, and I grieved it. Those things were there for me, and I grieved the loss of what they gave to me in my life, even though it was a negative impact. So we don't only grieve things that are positive for us, we grieve loss, all kinds of loss. I am here to tell you that there is absolutely no perfect way through grief. There are 5 stages, and knowing those 5 stages helps have awareness, and it helps communicate with those around you so that the impact is less. And I want to share with you some of the impact that grief can have on yourself and others so that you know the importance of working through it in a way that has the least impact on your life. When you're in severe grief, this is especially important. I remember times in the first days of losing my brother, feeding myself very well is something that I do. It's a value of mine, and sugar and flour are not healthy things for me. And I remember going to his memorial, and there was food everywhere, and all kinds of food that I normally don't look at, normally don't eat, hadn't eaten in years. And I remember sitting there thinking, I am not ready to feel this. I can't even deal with what I found out about my husband and the loss of my brother and the pain that I see on my parents' face, the pain that parents go through when their child dies before them, and not only that, but took his own life. And I said, game on, and I ate the food. And so that impacted my health, it impacted my weight, it impacted my kids because they had seen me do one thing for years and now mom's doing something else, and that's confusing. So don't think for a minute that what you do doesn't affect those around you. And grief impacts us physically. We can feel flu-like symptoms. You can feel sick. You can be dizzy. You can be nauseous. You can be very forgetful. That's a definite symptom of being in the grieving process. Like you'll walk upstairs or in another room and completely forget what you were doing or what you're going to get. So those are just some of the physical impacts that we have from grief. You know, emotional impacts, you go through anger, depression, and we'll talk more about that in the 5 stages of grief. Of course, we oftentimes get angry, and what's underneath is grief. I think a lot of people live in resentment and anger and never get down to the deep root that they've had deep, deep loss. And that's where the true healing happens. It impacts those around you because your tolerance for normal things goes away. Like I have 2 teenage daughters, and as I've been through this grieving process, there's days where I just could not handle one more thing, and I have a bad tone, or I'd snap at my kids. And I think had I been more aware, had I had the support that I needed right away, that some of that can be prevented. So I'm here today with you to share about prevention, to help you get through the grieving process as peacefully and as eloquently as you can, because I can share with you my suppressing the grief made it take longer, and it made it harder. And once I fully embraced and leaned into it, there's a beautiful, beautiful sweetness and healing. And it's actually really sweet to feel pain. And I never thought that I could tell you that. As we take this time together and I walk you through the journey of the 5 stages of grief, the most important things to remember and be listening for are awareness. Because when we're aware, we can change our behavior, we can acknowledge. Acknowledgement is huge in the grieving process. Just knowing what's going on with you and being able to share it with those around you helps intimacy through the whole process, that you're not alone. And it's also important to know that I'm going to share with you in a linear way 5 stages, but this process is not linear and there's no time frame. People always ask me, how long does it take? It takes what it takes, and the only way out is through. Sometimes it takes people 20 years because they won't allow it to happen. For me, I'm just in the sweetness of the grieving process, and it's been 2 years since those very big losses, and I suppressed it a lot, like I shared with you, and I'm going to share with you the ways in which I really let it rip and experienced the deep, deep pain of grief and the sweetness and the serenity and peace that comes from really letting it up and out. So as we walk through these 5 stages together, remember awareness. Remember that it's not linear and that there's no time frame. But the more you're aware that you're going in and out of these different 5 stages, you might move into one and then back to the other and then back to the other, that you will come to the sweet place and stage 5, which is peace and acceptance. Stage 1 is denial, and we use it to shut out our awareness of things that would be too disturbing to know. I think that really says it all. That says what denial is. These come up as thoughts or words that are, for instance, I don't care, it's no big deal. We have mental avoidance, which is a protective mechanism, and that can be obsessing, being busy, talking excessively, being with people all the time. I know many of you have experienced like just going through your day. You get up at 5:30 a.m., you go crash at 9:30, and you don't know where the day went because you were so busy. This is a way to stay in denial, to avoid what is too painful to really look at. And this is not bad. This is not necessarily bad. This is a way that our body, mind, and spirit starts to go through grief. So denial is not wrong. It's not bad. It's something that protects us. It helps us move. Now, if we live in a state of denial and we stay there forever, then we're keeping ourselves from going through the process. But this is the first stage. So it's the hardest one to recognize, obviously, as well. When we're in denial, we usually don't see it, but it is a way to protect us from what is too painful. So in this first stage of denial, the state is shock, numbness, panic, general refusal to accept or acknowledge the current reality. We do everything and anything to put things back in the place or pretend the situation isn't happening. There is much anxiety and fear in this stage, and typical reactions include refusing to believe the reality, denying or minimizing the importance of the loss. I know that this happened often in my marriage. When you know a reality that is coming that you don't want to be the answer, like I did not want to accept what was going on in the reality of my marriage. And so, of course, I denied it. I tried to make it not so because I didn't want that to be the truth, because I knew that if that was the truth, I would suffer severe loss. And so when you don't want something to be true, even if you lost something, let's say, I actually had a friend who had $10,000 in the bank, and she was from another country, and the bank closed or something happened where she lost her money, and she went through this process of not believing that the news was correct and not believing the emails she got were correct and denying that that must all be a mistake because there's no way she could have lost her whole life savings. So you can see that in anything that we don't want to lose, of course, first we're going to be in shock and denial and try to name that that's not the reality, because we can't accept in that moment that that's the true reality. So essentially, denial is the shock absorber for the soul, and it helps us get through pain, shock, and trauma. And it's a natural reaction. It's a natural reaction to pain, loss, and change. It actually protects us, and it wards off the blows of life until we have the support and coping mechanisms that we need to move out of it. So it's not immediate. It's not something that has to click for you, but as you gather support, as you gather the coping skills, you'll be able to move out of denial. Stage 2 is anger. And when the denial wears off, sometimes we go right into one of the other stages, but a lot of times people go into anger. And anger can come out as just irritability, like everything. I used to describe it as I feel itchy. I feel itchy and everything rubs me wrong. And if you say something wrong or do something wrong, everything is irritating. And that can be how anger comes out when you're in extreme grief. It can also be like soul rattling rage. I've seen people completely lose it when they're angry, and I think I shared earlier about an experience when I just lost it on the hill and went outside and threw rocks and yelled at God. And we get really angry because we don't want what's really happening. We don't want that loss. We don't want to believe it's true. And then when we know that it's true, we get really angry about it. We're angry that we lost something that we really wanted to have longer, whether it's a person or a relationship or a job or an addiction that we want to hang on to. And I remember being really angry when I finally accepted the reality that I was an addict. I was pissed. Like, this is not my life path. This is not something I want to deal with that. And this often happens when people are diagnosed with something, with cancer, with diabetes. As they go through the grieving process of their own health, you are angry. You're angry you're not healthy. You're angry that you have a disease. And so this shows up in different ways, this anger. And it's important to recognize that it's okay to be angry and to let it out in appropriate ways. It was much more appropriate for me to go throw rocks on the hill by myself than it was for me to snap at my kids because I was irritated all the time. So it's important to hold space for yourself when you're in anger, or be around people that are able to hold space for you. I once participated in a whole workshop where we learned that anger wasn't horrible, and we actually would allow one person to go into rage and anger, and we'd breathe their energy in, taking it as fuel and letting this fuel us with excitement and passion, and to allow them permission to be angry, because oftentimes we have such judgment around being angry that we suppress it. We think we're not supposed to be angry, or we're not supposed to be mad. And it's like, you know what? When we lose something, we're mad, and it's okay to be mad. And it's okay to ask people to be able to hold your anger, to be with you while you're angry. And it's okay to be angry by yourself. But naming that you are angry and that you do feel ripped off, or that you do feel sad and mad and furious, it's important. It's important to move out of denial and acknowledge that you feel a loss. I think ripped off was a feeling that I felt often, like I feel absolutely robbed. I feel robbed of my brother's life. I feel robbed of my marriage. And I was angry at addiction, because addiction took those two people from me. And I wanted to just be very angry that addiction exists. And you know what? That was okay. So stage 3 is bargaining, and I have a little giggle on my face because this is one of my personal favorites, one I live in the longest, and one I'm quite a master at. Bargaining is rationalization. It's bargaining to not lose the situation. And bargaining doesn't last as long when you have a death. It shows up when there's a death, as far as, should I have done something different medically? Should I have called a doctor sooner? Could I have done something to prevent this? And that's how we rationalize and bargain when it's around death. I think this stage lasts a lot longer when it's around losing an addiction or losing a relationship. And I used to bargain with my marriage, like, if I talked nicer to him, if I did this, if I got this support, if I didn't say anything, if I, it's all the things that you wish you could do to control the situation because you don't want to face the reality of the loss. And so you bargain and rationalize and look to have things changed. So how do you know when and how to get out of bargaining? And I was reflecting on this for myself and with my marriage and my personal addictions. I had to exhaust every resource of control or manipulation or power that I felt that I had over it. I had, for instance, when you're talking about food or alcoholism, I'll only eat cake at a wedding. I'll only drink on the weekend. I'll only have wine. I'll only have beer. I'll only drink on vacation. These are bargaining ways. And most addicts, or if you're talking about just a life circumstance, like, I'll only not exercise when I have family or friends over. I'll only skip my meeting, or all the things that we bargain about in life. I believe that unless you are really open and you can learn through vision pulling you rather than pain pushing you to get out of the bargaining process, you have to exhaust every resource until you finally give up and you're like, I have no control over this. And that helps you move into the later stage that we'll talk about, which is acceptance. And when you're thinking of a relationship or a job, you might have to exhaust every resource of, if I do this, my boss will like me more. If I stay late, they'll promote me. If I talk nicer, if I keep the house clean, he won't be mad. If I do this, they won't smoke. If I do this, they'll do that. It's really, if I do this, this will happen. And once we go through all those things and really exhaust every resource, at some point you quit. At some point you quit. Depression is stage 4, and this is normally after bargaining because we get so entirely exhausted of trying to make a different reality that we go into hopelessness, we go into depression. And for some people this is a deep sadness. For most people this is the really important extensive stage of grief, like really leaning into the grief, like that you are really, really sad about the truth, about the reality, about the loss. And it's important that during depression that you take gentle care of yourself. This is a chemical thing that happens in the body. So we all know that depression is a mental illness, and I'm not talking about mental illness, but when you are under a huge loss or a shock or a trauma, your body can be chemically altered, like your serotonin levels actually change. So you can actually have chemical depression and mental depression that is just caused from grief at the same time. And I really advise you to have support during depression, whether it's natural amino acids or seeking the care of a healthcare professional, taking extra sleep, taking baths, taking time to care for your nutrition, to make sure that you're fed well and rested well. Treating yourself as if you're sick and that you need extra care during this time, having emotional support from those around you. And the good news is this phase goes away too. It lifts. Even if it affects you chemically and physically, it also changes. It doesn't stay that way forever, but support is so important during depression. Stage 5, acceptance. And let me remind you that acceptance doesn't mean explicit joy and happiness. It means peacefulness and acceptance of the reality that you're in now. And it's a calm. It's a peaceful calm. And this is it. After we have closed our eyes, kicked, screamed, negotiated, and finally felt the pain, we arrive at the sweet state of acceptance. You may ask yourself, how do I know when I'm in acceptance, and will I go back to the other stages once I get to acceptance? And the knowing comes from a peacefulness, from really taking a truth-finding inventory, and when you've really faced the loss and look at the loss, and then with awareness comes action. So when you're able to take action according to the truth, that's really an indication that you're in acceptance. And when you have a peaceful calm that comes over you, and you're in acceptance. And I have to say that in my marriage, I stayed in this process the longest. And I have to believe that's because I did not want to accept the truth. The truth meant I had to leave my marriage. And that's not the reality that I wanted. So I stayed in this as long as I could, because moving to acceptance meant I had to leave. I had to have the ending. So in life circumstances, such as a job or a relationship or something like that, when you're in acceptance, when you can move into peaceful action that is right with the facts and the reality that's in your life. With death, it's when you're not hooked in grief. And what do I mean by that? I mean, like when I think of my little brother now, I can sometimes get a tear in my eye. When I was coming to do this video this morning, I picked up a little picture that I have of him and I when we were in our teens, and we looked absolutely goofy. And I just gave him a kiss, and I said, Bubba, help me say whatever needs to be said to help other people. And so does this right here mean that I haven't gone through the grieving process? No, I have a sweet acceptance that he's gone, that he's not coming back. And sometimes I get to feel sad, but I'm not angry, I'm not depressed, and I'm not in denial. And so acceptance, like I said, doesn't mean joy and happiness. It means peace. And you really will know when you're in it. It's a real peaceful calm, and it's a sweetness in your heart, and you can have connection with the reality of what is true. We must ward off the blows of life with denial until we are better prepared to deal with them. We must feel anger and blame until we have gotten them out of our system. We must try and negotiate, rationalize, and bargain, and we must cry. We don't necessarily have to let these stages dictate our behaviors, but each of us, for our own well-being and ultimate acceptance, needs to spend individually appropriate amount of time in each stage. The only way out is through. Healthy are those who mourn. It's important to have support during these times. Enroll your friends, enroll your loved ones, talk about it, write about it. Be kind to yourself, be nurturing to yourself, and be gentle with yourself. Peace and acceptance will come. Thank you for being with me and being witness to some of my own personal stories, and for sharing in this learning and teaching with me. This is healing for me. They say that we teach what we best need to learn, and everything I teach is things I need to continuously learn and continuously unfold in. And your time is precious, and it's been sweet to spend it together. And I hope that you share this with others and enroll the people in your lives to go through the process with you. We don't need to do it alone. And I also invite you to reach out to professional support, whether it's me or somebody else, and have that support while you're going through this process.
I really want to make sure. I don't know if that number is that still your number, Heidi? Yeah.
Same number.
Yeah, I'm pretty choked up. Pretty choked up. It was really beautiful. I've never seen this video. I didn't even know it existed until tonight. And Heidi, everyone needs to see this video. Everyone needs to see this video. You do such a beautiful job of weaving your own personal story with the stages and how to manage it. I mean, it's just, as a producer, I love it. As a love coach, academy guy, I love it. It's just really beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott, for showing it. I didn't even think of it until we were on the call and I sent it to you, and I got all choked up watching it too. So I just want to say that, as Timothy said about the dog, like, it doesn't go away. Like, the tears still come, but it's very different. I have a peacefulness when I feel gripped with that sadness about those two people in my life. And I wasn't joking when I said grief is one of my favorite topics. I love it. I love helping I loved helping hospice families be with people that were dying. I love taking people through grief in any level. It's touched my life. My own grief has given me more transformation than any other single thing.
I can barely talk. Sorry, I want to hear it. Trish, I love that all of our panelists are still with us. So love to hear from each of our panelists. Just any thoughts after
What
watching this
I
video?
love about that video is that it's so intimate, and it also, there's just so much information. It's the video for help, right? Like, it has so many tools and so much compassion. Like, it's really bringing the place of back to compassion. I felt like I know you a little bit, like, oh, hi, can we be friends? Yeah. I'm sending you virtual hugs if you want them. Thank you for teaching us how to love and grieve better.
Thank you, Trish.
This is absolutely one of my favorite straight talk episodes we've ever had. I'm just so proud of all of you. Thank you. Timothy, what's alive for you?
There's a beautiful moment where we see Heidi throwing rocks. She's talking over it, but we see her throwing rocks. And then if you listen closely, you can hear her wailing. And giving oneself permission, and it's nice when we have support, to throw rocks or beat the pillow or rage or yell, is such a key thing, because a lot of people get stuck with the anger part, especially when, and Heidi knows this, my brother took his own life as well. And I chose to get a guide to come and be with me. And I don't know if the neighbors called the cops, but I was outside in the backyard, like midnight, just yelling at the universe, yelling at him, hitting a stick against a tree. And there are ways to express that anger and that rage appropriately, where we're not hurting ourselves or putting holes in the wall or hurting anyone else. But it often takes did for me, took having someone with me who was encouraging me and giving me permission and saying, keep going, there's more. So I really liked that moment.
A few comments from our panelists. Lorna writes, or ML writes, grief is also physically exhausting. Thank you, Heidi, for honoring Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's stages of grief, which have been reflected by some. And again, just lots of people thanking you for your video, for your honesty, for your vulnerability. Lorna writes, one of the things we all need to grieve in community is that our own death is inevitable. No, I'm not going to die. You know, it's interesting. During this video, I went to the bathroom and I have photos up in the bathroom. And of course, my gaze went to a photo of myself with my wife, Suchi, and our two dogs, Boobali and Krishna. Krishna's gone. Suchi's gone. Boobali is still here. He's right down below me. But it was like, wow, there it is. You know, it's like we all come and we all go. We all come and we all go. Krishna, anything you want to share?
Yeah, thank you, Scott. And Heidi, thank you. I was really moved by that video. Look, a couple of things came up for me, and one was actually appreciating that whilst the grieving process may sort of be complete, we always have access to those feelings. I've seen all of you on the panel just well up a little bit in tears when thinking of a loss, and I'm hearing that that's okay. It's okay to still be able to access those feelings. And then Heidi, the other thing that you said that really struck some chords for me was when you said that it's actually the grief that you've experienced in your life which has helped define you the most.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Yeah, so true. So
It's
true.
created the most intimacy for me with other people and myself.
Well, thank you, Krishna. Thank you, Heidi. Thank you, Trish. Thank you, Timothy. I feel so honored to know all of you and to connect with all of you. And yeah, maybe we all take time. Maybe tonight, anybody watching, whether you're watching the video replay or watching us live, maybe just right now, what's something you want to grieve over? What's maybe something that you're missing, that you kind of stuffed, haven't acknowledged? It's might be a good time to drop in there. And I hope to see some of you tomorrow morning for Heidi and Timothy's class. I love each of you so freaking much. Thank you.
Thank
Good night, everybody.
you.
Thank you.